Greetings. I'm Brett Walter, founder and CEO of Climate Action Now. We are here tonight because we share an understanding that the election of the very unserious Donald Trump would be catastrophic for our climate and our democracy, and we want to do everything in our power to prevent it. The question is what to do. How do we use our limited time and money to maximum effect? To answer that question, Climate Action Now has organized this series of How We Win events, in which our questions can be answered by experts of the US political system and leaders of organizations that are working to get out the vote in crucial swing states and congressional districts. We've already had two very informative How We Win events with Nathaniel Stinnett of the Environmental Voter Project and David Callahan of Blue Tent, and we are putting links to those recordings in the chat right now. Very informative, highly recommended. I'd like to thank Dr. Marianne Krasny of Cornell University for proposing this series and using her influence to assemble our speakers. I'd like to thank Liz Bridgewater, Climate Action Now's Director of Outreach, for producing it. Thanks to our moderator, the indefatigable Jessica Craven, author of the hugely popular Chop Wood, Carry Water Substack, and an ardent champion for climate and progressive causes. Thanks to Robert Hubble, author of Today's Edition Substack, for helping promote this event. Thanks also to our speakers tonight, Lewis Friedland and Martha Lanning, for their valuable time and insights. And most of all, thank you for showing up when the showing up most matters. It is your passion, your commitment, and your love of our nation that is the ultimate answer to the question of how we win this November. Thank you for coming. So, as Kamala said at the beginning of her acceptance speech, let's get down to business, shall we? Over to you, Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Okay, well, I am so happy to be here. So lovely to see so many of you here. And I'm very excited for this event. Brett, thank you for having me, and thank you to all of the other amazing organizers. Today, we've got a really amazing lineup, and I'm not going to waste any time. I will get us right into it, but I just want to say that, first of all, if you are not if you do not use the Climate Action Now app, please make sure that before this meeting is over, you have downloaded it and started to use it, because it is absolutely fantastic. And this group is doing so much good, so much real, quantifiable good for the climate fight. Very grateful to them. And this has been such a terrific series and such a thrill to be a part of it. And secondly, we're going to be hearing from two great speakers today. And the first one is Martha Lanning. And I want to say that I love Martha. I have met with her one-on-one before. I am a huge, huge fan of the work she does. And I was really excited to hear that she was going to be one of the speakers today. So this is a very impressive human being. Martha is the founder of the State Party Advancement Network, or otherwise known as SPAN, which connects progressive donors with Democratic state parties. SPAN's work builds invaluable infrastructure to help elect more Democrats. Martha launched SPAN after serving as a full-time chairwoman of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. She was the chair right before Ben Wickler. And there she proved how important state parties are to Democrats' success. So I am really excited to hear from her, and I hope you are too. Let's pass it over to Martha.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you everybody from Climate Action Now. I'm really excited to be here with you to share a little bit about SPAN and how this all happened. So,
Martha, I'm sorry, before you jump in,
yep.
I'd just like to let people know that we'll be collecting your questions in the chat. So as the questions occur to you, please enter them into the chat. And then once Lou and Martha have finished their comments, Jessica will take the questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Brett. So just to tell you a little bit, I'm going to take you on my journey of learning about politics. I am not from politics. I worked with several Fortune 500 companies in finance and in community development. But back in 2014, I ran for office because Scott Walker and the Republicans were destroying Wisconsin, that I know. I was asked to close a 2-point spread in my Senate race, and I did everything they asked me to do. Took a year off of my career. I raised $250,000. for this little small Senate race. And I did 7% better than the top of the ticket. So you'd think I'd be Senator Lanning. I had lost by 20%. I was devastated. I used my analytics background to dig into what happened, and I learned that the data my campaign was based on was just bad data. Democrats don't show up in the midterms, and I was being compared to the Obama turnout. I mean, there were just lots of assumptions that were made, and I developed a bad strategy because of it. So I ended up renting a room in central Wisconsin. I invited all kinds of elected leaders and candidates and county party leadership, congressional, state party, to come together to really look at what is going wrong in Wisconsin. We had lost to Scott Walker 3 times, and the Wisconsin we knew was disappearing. And what we found were candidates like me were losing because Democrats weren't showing up and our message wasn't inspiring anyone. And literally rural parts of our state were getting no message at all because the party had no money and people weren't stepping up to run. So we needed to create a change. Now, there are a lot of challenges with state parties. When I honestly will tell you, I didn't know what the state party did when I was running for state Senate. I was worried about my campaign and I'm running, but I really didn't know the job of the state party. And what I did when I was digging into this more was found out that honestly, the challenges that state parties have are because of the funding that they have. I literally thought about starting a C4 organization rather than trying to fix the state party because I thought it would be easier. But the chair elections can cause such instability. The staff can all leave, and that's deeply concerning. And because this party is so poorly funded, right now, state parties only get $12,000 to $15,000 per month from the DNC. That's a guaranteed funding. Outside of that, they have to raise every dollar. And because of that, they had staff that were doing multiple jobs, burning out, and we just had this constant churn of people leaving, coming, and going. And so we really needed to create something different. So the easy thing would be to start a C4, but I learned that state parties have unique responsibilities that only they can do. And we had a lot of great C4 organizations in Wisconsin, but the issue was the party was not able to really fill their critical role. So just to name 2 of these, the data directors at the state parties, they take care of the data that is collected by the presidential candidates all the way down to the school board. So all of the volunteering that's being done for the Harris Walz campaign, that data is owned by the state party and the DNC, and it has to be managed by the state party. 60% of our election administration positions across the nation are filled by Democratic state parties, either appointed or in partisan races won. So there's really important work here that the Democratic brand has to be strong in a state so that we can get that job done. So I ended up running for the Wisconsin Democratic chair, and I was elected, and I focused on these 4 areas. These are the areas that I was really concerned about. What I found, though, was that it was 100% on me. The day I was elected, I was handed the gavel, run this meeting, and by the way, you need to start raising money from your friends and family and cold calling through this list to cover everything beyond $7,500 a month. And that's just a lift that is very challenging to manage. So I focused on these four areas. The first one we did pretty well on. We brought in a great data director. The second one I'm going to tell you about more in the later. We improved on the third one, and the comms one, we did do better, but you just can't get everything done in one cycle. I'm so happy that Ben Wickler, I actually asked Ben Wickler if he'd be interested in running for chair at the governor's inaugural ball, and he was very interested. So I'm thrilled that he's there and taking the party to a whole new level. But at that time, I was really focused on the first 2, data director and a field program. Now, why a field program? Because Hillary Clinton didn't inherit from the state parties the field program that she deserved. The 2016 election showed what we had been seeing in our gubernatorial races. Yes, money is important, but what's more important was timing. You can see here that the Obama team invested way more money in the state, and he had won the state by 400 and 200,000 votes. Versus Gore and Kerry had won it by only 5 and 11,000 votes. So very small margins. So those huge margins were built because 1, they put money into it, but 2, they started way out in the build year. Now the build year is the year before the major election. Some people used to call it the off year. We like to call it the build year because it's a time for you to organize that grassroots. The Obama model also had a different theory about how they organized. They didn't come in and just hire people 3 to 6 months before the election and then get volunteers there and give them a script and tell them go out and knock doors and do exactly what we told you. Instead, they would build relationships with neighborhoods and influencers in those communities. They would help the community learn how to organize about issues important to them, like building a new school or getting a stoplight on a corner. And then that field work would continue after the election. It was all about building stronger communities, not just about getting Obama elected. So our party in 2017, this is the only good thing that I can say came out of the 2016 election. It allowed us to try something different, that this is just not working, that the top of the ticket runs everything and helps us decide what to do. We need to build strong infrastructure independently. And so we hired 7 staff that were there to just build neighborhood teams. So in my little diagram you're seeing there, the blue are the paid staffers. You have the small number of paid staffers, and their job is to go out and find teams that they can train that are fully functioning and do not need them to be there to organize. So instead of having a paid staffer everywhere, you just have these fully functioning volunteer teams. Now we built over 220 of those by the time the 2018 election came. And the result was we swept every statewide race in Wisconsin, defeating Scott Walker, finally, and getting Democrats into every position in our statewide offices. It was an exciting thing that had never happened since 1984, so we were really proud about it. But just because you win doesn't mean everything you did was great, and just because you lose doesn't mean everything you did was bad. So we dug in more to say, are we sure our program made an impact? These are my favorite stats. The first one being that we spent half the money that the Hillary Clinton's field program that we had spent on the Hillary Clinton field program, and we did 80% more doors. By having that long runway to build our relationships with volunteers in every corner of our state, we were able to get more people out knocking doors and made a big impact. And the third one there is my other favorite one. So typically top candidates will come into a state and they have their win number and they're going to say, this is where we're going to put our resources because they're going to use those resources wisely. And this is where we can get to our win number. And oftentimes it's in really blue areas, maybe a couple purple areas, but they're not covering the whole state. They're really focusing on certain areas. Our state party, though, we focused everywhere. We covered the whole state and organized in 65 of our 72 counties, had a greater than 2% increase, and we organized in 68 of the 72 counties. The 19 reddest counties, so 30% Democrat, gave Governor Evers his win margin. If we had not organized in these really red counties, he would have lost. So I took this information and want to share with you that it's not just Wisconsin. It wasn't just the Democrats in Wisconsin that were doing this. Over in Michigan, the same thing was happening. And we're so glad Governor Whitmer became our governor over there. They built a program called Project 83. It's their 83 counties, getting county leadership to get volunteers out there, get candidates in all races. And they've just done an amazing job. They actually had 135 organizers handed over to President Biden when he was running back in 2020, and which was really exciting because compared to Hillary, only got 5. So they were building such an amazing program that it built power for the president. They did over 5 million doors in our cycle last year, and they had a candidate running in every single race, which is pretty unusual, shockingly, but it is really unusual. Wisconsin's neighborhood program has even grown bigger, and that's one of the things we love about it is you start it out, but then build on it cycle to cycle, keep people and keep building on those relationships. And they did actually 32% more doors in the Get Out the Vote program than I was even able to do, our team was able to do in 2018. So it's just showing the power growing, and that's exactly what we want to have happen. So what happened? Like, okay, this is what all happened in the past, but what's happening now? I recognize that we need to build power to have greater support of state Democratic parties. And so I started an organization, or I started a table. The table is called the State Party Advancement Network, SPAN. And what we do is we have 3 staff members. None of the money that will be collected today will go to SPAN or PAC or anything. 100% of the money goes directly into state parties' accounts. The beauty of that is that our staff are paid for by guiding members who want to have advice on where to send their money. So we solicit grant applications from state parties. We ensure that they're following best practices and that they have metrics, they're metrics driven. And then we meet with the state parties to be sure that they're meeting their metrics and help them through that. It has helped us stabilize state parties, that we are investing in things that are helping those state parties carry the learnings from one cycle to the next cycle. And I can explain more about that. So we give out two different kinds of grants. One is directly to state parties themselves into the state to pay for staff. So organizers, voter protection teams, constituency outreach organizers. Like these are staff members right on the ground. But we also do something we call operational centralized service grants. So these are, I used to work for Target stores, and we didn't, at headquarters, we didn't have in each one of our stores an IS department and a legal team. Like that's all centralized. And that's what we wanted to do here, is that we have a team, two teams. Stack Labs works on data analytics and technical support, and Dempower Labs works on voter protection. And these organizations are there to help state parties. Stack works with 30 states, and there's a list of states that want to join, but I need to raise more money to help them pay for that. And then Dempower Labs is working with 6 states right now, but they're there to mentor state party leadership and to help them get a plan in place, a template in place, be following best practices. And then we scale things across all states. Instead of paying for consultants in each one of these states doing things, we pay for it in one area and we can scale it to other states, diversifying that cost. So we hope to do more of them in the future, but right now we just have the 2. So we started in 2019, we raised 5 million that cycle, and 2020 mainly. And now we're up to about 8.5 million this cycle. And we hope to make our $12 million goal. Our long-term dream is to raise $50 million a year so we can help far more states. We're going to get there someday. But right now, what impact have we made? A lot. So Congresswoman Peltola was not on anyone's radar that she could win that state. Stack Labs leaned in and helped the Alaska Democratic Party put together a program that got her across the finish line for the special election, and then supported her again in the general when a lot more people were leaning in. But it's finding those opportunities and being sure that state parties have the resources to support that. You know, in Pennsylvania, we increased 32% the doors knocked that were done in the previous cycle. My favorite one about New Hampshire or Pennsylvania, though, is actually not here. And it is that in 2020, there were some ballots that needed to be cured in Bucks County to win the majority in the House. And the Bucks County clerk would not give over those ballots. She would not tell the state party what those ballots were. Stack Labs had a relationship with an employee at the county, and they ended up getting the ballots to be provided to the Democratic Party, who could then get them cured and can help soft sides. Also, you know, the information can be put out in DDX, the Democratic Data Exchange, and now the House had the majority, won the majority. So it's things like that where we're collaborating and helping solve problems that really makes a difference. So this year, you know, we've really focused on training. We've had a great data director training. We did the first new leadership training, bringing those people all together in Las Vegas and helping people really learn about their jobs and network together. We've helped Pennsylvania, focusing on Philly. It's one of the areas they're really working on. There was an article that recently came out about the turnout not being great there in the past, and Philly, Pennsylvania party's really leaning in there, and we helped invest that. Michigan has that amazing Project 83, and believe it or not, you know, a lot of people wait to invest all their money late in the cycle, and they were really struggling to keep that program up and running, and SPAN members helped invest in that to keep it going. And then we're helping with Stack Labs and Dempower Labs, being sure that states have the technical and voter protection support they need. So what's our ask today is that, you know, that the Harris Walz campaign is doing so well. We're so excited about that race and all the exciting things that are happening there. And they are investing in our state parties, which are super important, obviously our battlegrounds, but we really need to be sure that we win Congress too. And so we are focusing on 2 states, Ohio and Montana, have critical US Senate races, and they do not have the presidential campaign heavily investing in those states to build their field programs. So they're doing it with the party and the senators. And so we want to be sure that we give them a little extra boost right now. And then Alaska huge state, and the Alaska Dems could use more help. They have really strict fundraising rules there. You can only donate a small amount of state money. It's like $1,999 in state money. So they don't have those big donors that can come in and help the congresswoman. So the Alaska Democratic Party is our other ask. So there's a link that we'll be providing later. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to a good friend of mine, Lewis Friedland, who I met. He was a University of Wisconsin professor, and I'm so excited. Well, I think I'm turning it back over to Jessica, and she's introducing Lou, but he is going to be on.
Thanks, Martha. Yeah, I will just do a quick intro, but first of all, thank you. That was so amazing. I love hearing about the work that you are doing. And I mean, if we don't, it's so clear that state parties are so important, and to hear how you are helping them to organize better is just, I mean, we all know a well-functioning state party when we see it, and we know a badly functioning one when we see that too. And you guys are moving more into that first column, and it's really terrific. Okay, now we are going to hear, and don't forget, please put your questions in the chat. We need those questions. Lewis Friedland is the Vilas Distinguished Achievement Professor Emeritus in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, UW-Madison, and an affiliated professor in the Department of Sociology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He founded and leads Win Wisconsin, raising money for the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, and has advised the Democratic Party of Wisconsin on communication issues. So now let us turn over to Mr. Friedland and hear all about that. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm really happy to be here with Martha, who is a great hero of democracy in the United States, and I mean that sincerely. If it wasn't for Martha, I think it's fair to say that the Democratic Party of Wisconsin wouldn't have been rebuilt in 2016, 17. Tony Evers might not have won in 2018, and the rollback of Republican misrule, for lack of a better way of putting it, in Wisconsin might not have happened. So I think it's really important to understand that these days, my good friend Ben Wickler is a prominent person in the media and receives a justifiable share of credit for what he's doing for Wisconsin. But without Martha, none of that would have happened. I mostly want to supplement what Martha said to you and to emphasize again how critical state parties are. I think that many of us, people in the academic community, progressive communities, people who are used to supporting C3s and C4s that have very special missions, which is a good thing to do, by the way, don't always understand precisely what state parties do. Martha's told you a lot of what they do, but I want to emphasize again, without state parties, we cannot win. We can't win presidential campaigns, because if there was no state party, if there were no state party organizations in, for example, Michigan, or weak state party organizations in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, then Kamala Harris would lose, period. John Fetterman would have lost. Tammy Baldwin would lose. And I want to stress this. I don't want to stress the negative, but I do want to make it extremely clear that state parties are the spine. They're the backbone of all politics in the United States, certainly all progressive politics on the Democratic side. And they're also often the least supported entities. Martha told you how much the Democratic National Committee gives to state parties. I think it's capped at 15,000, Martha. Mm-hmm. It's nothing. It's a pittance. And essentially, those are the parties that when you hear that, Kamala Harris has opened 150 field offices, which is great, in Pennsylvania, but those are essentially that's building on the foundation that the state party in Pennsylvania has already done. Everything that the presidential campaign does rests on that foundation. But also, if we have a chance of winning Congress and the Senate, of keeping the Senate this year, the only reason that will be done is because also the strength of state parties, in this case, where we have super competitive races in Michigan, in Wisconsin, but also in Montana, and Ohio. So those are the places where we've chosen those races, Ohio, Montana, because they're the ones who are getting the least attention because they are not swing states, they're not battlegrounds. But yet, and I can't stress this enough, if Tester and if John Tester in Montana and Sherrod Brown in Ohio lose, there will be no climate agenda in the United States. There will be no climate agenda in the Senate. If we don't win the races that, like Mary Pelotola's, and I know that some of you may think Mary Pelotola's too centrist on some climate issues, and maybe she is, in the sense that maybe some of us would prefer that she would take other positions. But if we don't hold Congress, or I should say, if we don't win back Congress in this next cycle, there will be no climate agenda. The climate agenda that President Biden started and Kamala Harris began with the help of our Senate and our House, which was then essentially lost in the last cycle, we are going to lose that. And so at best, Kamala Harris will be able to move climate through executive orders. I think everyone understands that that's not sufficient anymore. We need to win the House races, and to win the House, you need to win the blue dog seats. You need to win the marginal seats. You need to win the seats of the people that you may not like as much because they don't fit all of your notions of what a proper congressperson should take. Obviously, there's people who you may dislike for very good reasons, or you can't support candidates. I understand that, but I want to stress that we can't always choose our allies. We can choose our friends, but we can't choose our allies. And our allies in Congress are the people who are going to win us a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. Last thing I want to say is, before we go to questions and answers, is that state parties, I know that many of you, probably many of you on this call, I don't know, I shouldn't actually say this. I'm guessing that I know some of you live in blue states, and I want to tell you what it's like to live in a red state that's actually a purple state, in which non-democratic rule, and I mean this, Wisconsin was the testing ground for authoritarianism in the United States. What the Republicans did starting in 2010 in our state was a testing ground for Trumpism, because they had unified control of our state government. They took it way, way far to the right of the public. At times, I can't remember this. I wish I should have written this down in advance. I'm sorry. But basically, we would win 53, 54% of the votes for the assembly and get 33% of the seats, because we lived in one of the two most gerrymandered states in the United States, North Carolina being the other one. So that's the other thing that I can't stress enough to all of you. State parties matter. State parties matter if you don't want, given the Supreme Court rulings that have pushed much law back to the states, including environmental law. If we don't control state houses or state assemblies and state senates, then our state governors also will not be able to create positive climate agendas. So state parties are the backbone that allow us to win in the states. They allow us to build the campaigns that allow us to elect Congress people and senators. And that is what allows us also to elect, we will elect Kamala Harris. But if there were no strong state parties, they wouldn't exist. So Martha, when I discussed our donation tonight, we decided, I raised money. I in Wisconsin is my organization. I raised money for Wisconsin. We're doing pretty well, I have to acknowledge. But also I'm raising money now for Michigan and Pennsylvania as well through SPAN. But we decided that our needs right now, just literally at this juncture, and this is partly because of SPAN that we could make this judgment. Martha is so tied in to the needs of different states and state parties that she could say, well, Ohio and Montana are the places that aren't getting funds that they need right now. And as she and I discussed it, if no Tester, no Brown, then no climate agenda in the Senate. It's just really that simple. So that's why we shifted that focus, and similarly to Mary Peltola, to retain the House. So I know we have a lot of people with a lot of questions on the call tonight, but I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for supporting state parties. I hope you'll keep SPAN in your sights as you look to donations. As after we've won, even after we've won the presidency and won hopefully the Senate and the House back, keep your eyes on SPAN, because think of them when you're making donations. This is the very last thing I'll say. C3s and C4s get the lion's share of the money and from the progressive community, because they fit people's very specific conceptions of causes and groups that they want to support. That's good. I support that. I give my money to C3s and C4s myself, but without state parties, they couldn't do their work. C3s and C4s, various, League of Conservation Voters in my own state of Wisconsin, a great group, without whom we wouldn't have the climate agenda that we have in our state. But if the LCV had all the money in the world, without the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, it really couldn't move anything in this state, legislatively or politically, in terms of winning its agenda. So I just want you to be aware that money to SPAN or money to state parties is money to build infrastructure that benefits everyone. C3s, C4s, winning the assemblies in those states, winning the Senate races, supporting Senate candidates in the presidency. It's the entire spine of our political system. So somebody's asking, what are C3 and C4 organizations? Sorry, I've been in this world too long. I realize I'm going to define them, and then I will stop, Jessica, and we can move on to Q&A. C3s and C4s are those are IRS codes that mean essentially organizations that are on we call them in the political world on the soft side, meaning that they can do representative work. They educate people on everything from climate to race and gender issues and the whole panoply of groups that you support. But they can't directly engage in political activity, even though it often feels like they're engaging in a kind of indirect political activity. They can legally do that. But if you want to engage in politics, you have to support organizations on the so-called hard side, which are state parties, basically, and candidates. So I'm going to stop and open this up to everyone now.
Okay, first of all, that was a great explanation of C3s and C4s. Thank you. That does get confusing, I think, for people. Okay, well, that was another totally fantastic talk. I love hearing people talk about giving money to state parties. Makes me very happy. Because I'm all about strategic donations, and that is truly strategic and smart. So fantastic. Okay, let's go to some of these questions. We have a question for Martha. Do you have a methodology to provide a quantitative score to each particular state party? If so, how can I see the score for the party in my state, New York? And for the 7 swing states that people say will decide the outcome of the presidential election and the leadership of the House and Senate starting in 2025.
So we meet with the state parties. If we're going to be investing in a state party, our staff, which again is paid for by different donors, 100% of the money that you would give using the link tonight goes to state parties. None of it comes to us. That money or that evaluation is, we have a grant application, people fill out the grant. It has to have certain metrics. So do we give it a score? No, it's not an exact score, but it has to check off that it is metrics driven, that whatever the practice is, we're following best practices, that the timeline is reasonable, that they have enough resources. Like if we gave, can they completely fund what we're supposed to be funding, or are they have too big of eyes for what they think they can get done? Like we have all these metrics. And then once a grant is approved, that we're like, this is a good go, then we put it out to our states. We do not work with all state parties. New York, for instance, we have helped them raise money to get Stack Lab services, but we have not invested in building infrastructure in their state, because we're focusing the money that we have on the most critical areas. And New York is a critical area. It definitely is. It's just we were already committed to our battleground states, that I could not add a New York state, but I did lean in for the Stack Labs services.
Can I just add one thing quickly to that, Jessica? I think sometimes we think, well, we want to give to the high scorers, right? And I know some organizations like Focus for Democracy, they rate people and they have all these metrics. And some of those metrics are good, and but some of them skew giving. Because I'll give you a very specific example. A few years ago, the state party of Pennsylvania was not that strong. I think it's, Martha, fair to say. They were in some turmoil. Stack helped them. They wouldn't have scored highly, but Span rather, well, Stack too, but Span helped them and helped them rebuild that party. Now, if you were simply going on metrics, they would have had a fairly low score. But they are essential organization to winning. So it's Span among others, but Span played a central role in helping them rebuild that party. So now they would have a higher score. But simply the metrics, sometimes we need to build where we're weak as well as where we're strong. And that's one reason why Span is such a great organization, because it does know that field. It doesn't just give money away. It does apply performance metrics to the organizations that it gives to. But it also has a sense of, well, I mean, North Carolina, some of you are familiar with North Carolina right now, the great new chair, Anderson Clayton, amazing woman. But North Carolina was a weak party. Anderson Clayton wasn't even paid, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Martha, up until I think this year. So that was a weak party. They would have had a weak metric, but now they're in contention as a swing state once again. So we need to be careful as we apply metrics to not apply them overly rigidly, I think.
Okay, great question. A couple of people are asking if they can donate directly to Span. Is that possible?
No. So, and you guys, you can yell at me about this because some people are like, Martha, just get a PAC. But my goal is really, I want all the money to go to the state parties. Like that's what it is. And we work for the donors to help donors know where to have their money and where to put it. Maybe someday in the future, we'll create a PAC so we can deal with more emergency. But we work for the donors to advise donors on where you should put your money and being sure that they're getting a return on the investment. And their goal, the donors' goals, is to build stronger state parties so we can win more elections up and down. And one great example of that is when you build a strong state party, you're not just ready for this election, you're ready to win special elections that come up on a dime. And Democrats have been winning special elections in a much higher margins than, or much higher numbers than in the past. And I think in part because we know about how important year-round organizing is and we're ready to do it.
So if I understand you
the
correctly,
next cycle, but also defending the elections when November's over, we're going to have to defend these elections in many states. And it's going to be the state parties who are going to lead the struggle to make sure that those elections where we've won legally and legitimately and validly are defended.
So Martha, you are saying if people want to donate to Span because they think you're so fantastic, what they should do is donate to the state parties, and the state parties will then come to you.
So the link that Liz has been sharing in the chat, and I'm sure it's going to go out later, if you click on that link, it's going to take you to an Act Blue page that says Span. But we have set it up so that you're actually donating to those 3 Democratic state parties. You can either customize it, so you can pick what amount you give, or you can just put your money in there. It's going to be evenly divided between those 3 state parties. But if you're giving to those 3 state parties, in my mind, you're giving to Span. Span is just the name of the donor tables, and we're just helping people know where to put their money in the state parties.
Great. Was a really good question. Okay. So someone had asked a question. It was a very sort of specific question about Dr. Kirsten Lyerly, I believe her name is, who's running in a district that's fairly red. But let's try to generalize the question a little bit so it can apply outside of that district. But what can we do when there is a district that is very red and Democrats seem to decide it's not competitive? Or what are your thoughts on that?
You want to take that one, Lou?
Well, that's a good question. It's a hard question. If Democrats decide it's not competitive, then I think pouring money into a non-competitive seat is probably burning money. To be honest, that's not the right answer. That's not the politically correct answer, but that's the honest answer. If a seat's really non-competitive, but the problem is that we need to define non-competitive. As Martha said, we won Tony Evers' gubernatorial election because we reduced margins in 19 counties. So Kirsten Lyerly is a great example. Kirsten? Yeah. She's a OBGYN, Brown in the Green Bay area, Brown County and Green Bay, and the 8th Congressional District. It was a Republican seat. she's an underdog, but if she does well in the 8th, that will help Kamala Harris win in Wisconsin because it will reduce the margin. Now, Rebecca Cook in the 3rd district of Wisconsin, a fantastic candidate in my personal view, but also, probably more centrist than some people would like. But Rebecca is running a fantastic race in the 3rd. She'll be a great climate advocate, but she's not out talking about climate change every day. She talks about the environment, about pollution, about family farms, and so on. And she's going to reduce those margins in the 3rd district. Now, I hope Rebecca wins, and I hope Kirsten wins too. And I've given money to them both, just disclosure. So I support them. I really, really do. I think Rebecca's more likely to win than Kirsten if I had to just put a bet on it. But I've given money to both of them because they both help us win Wisconsin. And so there are some other Peter Barker is also running in Kenosha. That's a second, right, Martha? First, sorry, I do get it wrong. Peter Barker in Kenosha also has a pretty good shot. So the party's chosen to invest. The state party isn't gonna pour money into, a race that we're just gonna lose. It doesn't make sense, but we can pour money into those races where we can either win or reduce the margin statewide. And that'll also help Tammy Baldwin win. So if Kirsten and Rebecca run well, then the assembly candidates below them will do well. And Tammy Baldwin above her will do well, and so will Kamala Harris do well. So it's a vertical across the entire state.
So I agree with what Lewis said, but I'm also going to add in that I think there have been races that have won. Mary Peltola would be one of them that no one thought could be won. Washington's 3rd congressional district. I had donors tell me it's got an 8% chance of winning. I'm like, I don't care. The Washington State Party is telling me that they're in it to win it and that this is a possibility, and she won, right? So there are great races that can be won, and only boots on the ground can know that. I think the key is you have to have enough money that you can support candidates. And I really wanted it to be like, you're in it to win it. Like, you can do this. A Nux group would be within reach. You're within reach, and let's put some money in and let's keep building this cycle after cycle. And then there are some that are in it for the long haul. You're in a 30% Democratic area. It's going to be very hard to win it, but bless you, bless you, bless you for running, because you're helping us draw out volunteers and votes for everybody on the ticket. So we all have to be working at it. And I think that's the key. Is I want to have a strong state party that offers decent support to everybody. And I know that's not all happening. It pained me when I was the chair and I could not do more. I gave $1,000, woohoo, to each candidate, but you want to build it up over time so that you can really be offering great support.
And not just support, but of course we need to win. We need to have a presence in Wisconsin, but it's true across all states and all 72 counties. If we don't start contesting as Democrats and progressives in rural areas, we're going to be in this 50-50 stasis in the United States forever. If we don't start talking to, and not simply rural, we say rural, but we mean small, medium cities, small towns. 40+% of Democrats live in small towns in Wisconsin. So if you don't speak to those towns, you're basically missing almost half the state.
So interesting. Okay. This is a question for Martha. Is it fair to say that in months December, January through August, SPAN invests in capacity building for state parties, and in September, October, and November, SPAN invests in shared services delivered to your highest priority states?
So I would say, so our biggest dream is that we want to build in the build year, because we want to invest when a lot of people are not paying attention, to build that infrastructure so that we can have the roadmap to build the relationships, find more poll watchers who are interested, doing all those kinds of things, building relationship with influencers in our communities. So that's what that is. As we get closer to the election, it gets harder and harder to hire organizers and to be doing all these things. You can do it to a certain degree, but if you don't have a good, robust program that has trainers and all those things, it gets really tough. And so most of our investment comes earlier. Right now, what you're investing in is helping them pay for things that they want to do, that they are doing right now, that are on the plans, that paying for salaries that are out there and they need to raise more money for them. So I don't know if that answers that entirely, but I also would say one other thing is scaling. So like for Stack Labs and Dempower Labs, when they build a field report that shows any stakeholder, like this is exactly how many doors we did, how many calls we did, how many texts we did, these are the responses that we got from those. That state data director can now give that to all the campaigns to be able to look at their data. They can share that field report, which is really valuable. So we're building things that they can share and create value to their stakeholders to help win more elections. And that can be scaled across states. Once we build it for one state, we can build it for more states. So that's the kind of work that we're trying to invest in that builds power exponentially.
Somebody asked if you could remind them what Stack Labs means again.
Yeah, so Stack Labs is a stack. It's some techie term, like you have stack of tech on top of each other. I'm not a tech person, so I'm like, okay, that works for me. You called yourself Stack Labs. Stack Labs is a technologist that meets on a weekly basis with the data director in a state. So like when I was the chair, I was supposed to hire a data director. I don't know anything about data. Now the DNC has a great tech team that can help, but they don't have the capacity to help at the level that Stack does. Stack meets with the technologist every single week. Stack has helped state parties better utilize the tools of the DNC. They build these amazing tools, but if somebody doesn't have the skills to know how to do that, that Stack person can be there to say, let me show you how we do this. And they're also there for capacity. Sometimes state parties have amazing data directors that are very, very skilled, and it's just another person that can help. But then they also can help by building things that they can share, as I shared before. And then finally, when we do have this churn, this turnover, which happens, chairs leave, a new person comes in, new staff come in. It's great to have Stack and Empower Labs there because they create the stability to say, we've been here for 2 cycles with you guys. We can tell you exactly what's happened in the last 2 cycles. This is how your data is organized. Yep, I know exactly where that is. I can turn that on for you. They're just there to better support the state parties.
I just want to say quickly, SPAM helps provide continuity and organization to state parties. So when Anderson Clayton came in North Carolina, there were a lot of things. She's a great organizer. There are a lot of things she didn't know, like any of us. We had an organization. Doesn't mean you're an expert in data or the voter file or fundraising or a range of other things. Stack is like the back office. I mean, that's not Stack, SPAN, and Stack is a part of that, that provides the expertise and the continuity so that when an Anderson Clayton, a great chair, comes into a state, and they do revolve fairly quickly, 2-3 year cycles, they have this back office of support that could help them not just get up to speed, but be up to speed so that they can do the core organizing work that usually that's why chairs are selected.
Okay, this is just fascinating. Thank you. These are great answers. Okay, this is a great question that I'm sort of wondering too. Why are you guys prioritizing Peltola's race over the close races in New York State or California?
Yeah, so New York State has a lot of donors that are already invested. They have over 60 organizers on the ground. Frankly, New York is a smaller landmass than Alaska is. I mean, it's just, Alaska is really dependent on being able to work with volunteers in an area and organize those volunteers because, and I'm sure you all know this, unfortunately, Congresswoman Peltola's husband was killed in a plane accident flying in Alaska. So there's just a lot of challenges that Alaska is dealing with. Secondly is, New York can take very large checks written out, huge checks, versus Alaska can only take $10,000 in federal money and then $1,999 in state. And that's it. So they can have a large donor, but they can only give that much. So we need more donors. And so that's why the New York State races are very, very important. And we have met with the New York State Party and are helping them with their tech. They really wanted us to help with tech. And as I said earlier, we helped them with being sure that they got Stack Lab services to help with that.
And I just want to say
to do so much more. If everybody writes big checks, we'll do more and more and more.
Alaska is a state that's very slowly turning purple. I think a lot of people don't understand that. And the more you can turn Alaska purple, and Montana, I would call it purple, but it's essentially got purplish tinge maybe now. You have activists in those states. Electing Mayor Peltola is a minor miracle, to be blunt. And retaining that seat in a Congress where 3 seats could determine control is a super high priority. But not just because of that one seat, but because also you're anchoring that state, you're helping it move in a purple direction. And every state that moves in a purple direction is a state that Republicans have to spend money contesting, right? So even if you're not going to win in Alaska for 10 years or however many cycles, you're forcing other folks to play on that. You're broadening the playing field or the battleground, depending on how you look at it. And that benefits everybody everywhere.
Fantastic. Okay, so this next question I am excited about because I think it'll get Martha to talk about Florida, and I have heard her talk about Florida's state party, and it was really inspiring to me. So somebody asked, what would it take for SPAN to support Texas and Florida? So there you go.
Okay, so you got two of my favorites here. So in 2020, we did support Texas and Florida. We were supporting 10 states in that year. I'm going to start with Texas. I bet you that there are many people on this call that do not know that there is only one president that has ever beat Joe Biden's vote totals in Texas, and that is only Donald Trump, and only in 2020. So Joe Biden got more votes for president than Hillary, than Donald Trump in 2016, and every president in history in the past in Texas. Now, you would think we would come out of there and say, wow, Democrats, you increased voter turnout by 1.1 million new Democratic voters. You guys are amazing. We're going to keep you going, and we are going to win the next time. But instead, when you lose, everybody says the Democrats did a terrible job, and there was just terrible things put out in the press and attacks done to the staff, and the staff left. And that loss is huge. They had just an amazing team. They had an MIT graduate as their data director. They had an amazing data team that was finding new people to register. They were incredible. So it is a heartache for me because Texas is if we win Texas, it's over for the Republicans. There is no road to victory without Texas. So it was very painful to see that happen. And we have to be doing a better job of seeing we may not win it, as Lou had said, in one cycle, but can we win it in two? Can we win it in three? Florida is another one. Everybody came down on Florida, and they did. They lost by a percentage, but if you go look at the numbers, they increased voter turnout by 700. I think it's 40,000. I don't remember exactly, but it's 750,000 new voters in Florida in 2020. Amazing. And because they lost, they were just, vilified, and we started all over, and they don't know what they're doing, right? Now, the thing that's surprising, I love my state of Texas, or of Wisconsin. I love it, but Wisconsin increased voter turnout by the exact same percentage that Florida did, but they won. But it is a much smaller number of voters than Florida had because they have so many more voters, right? So to me, we need to look at the facts, and we need to have an organization like SPAN that's saying, hey, before we get all upset, like this state won, but they didn't do this, they didn't do this, like we need to improve here, but this state lost, and this is what they've done amazing work, we're doing great, or no, we need to start over, like we're in a big mess here. Like there's all kinds of good stories, and Wisconsin has led the way in showing some good leadership, right? Michigan has, they have a trifecta. They had candidates running in every single state. Texas deserved its due by turning out 1.1 million voters. That's 4 times more voters than Wisconsin turned out. It's amazing. And that's what's heartbreaking to me, is we need to be sure that we reward everybody, not just the people who win the race, that we look at what the work is that's been done.
Well, there's a question in the chat, and I'm curious too, vilified by who? Was it, how were they driven out? How do we avoid that happening next time?
So right now I'm in the process of trying to write a memo that says, let's get prepared for after the election. Like, how are you going to, if you lose, how are you going to promote the good work that you've done? And if you win, great. How are you going to say we made an impact on that, right? Like it's the metrics, like what are those? So I'm working on that right now to be able to say, we got to be on the offensive here. But what happens is, people start talking to people. People are upset. We just lost. How could this happen? And so then they're talking to reporters. Reporters put out articles to say, oh, Democrats are up in arms because they were told they were going to win, and they're so disgusted with the party. And, somebody's quoted, and we're going off of those things. And so what I'm trying to help state parties, and obviously we need resources at the state parties to do this, but to help them be able to prepare for what are the numbers you're going to look at and what are you going to be calling into reporters right away. But it's also the grassroots, okay? There can be times that people are just so frustrated that nobody's presented to them all the facts for them to see exactly the progress that we made. And again, that's on the offensive. Then I'm like, we need to show people right away that, whoa, we increased voter turnout by 1.1 million new voters. Like, that's amazing stuff, you guys. Yes, we lost a big step forward. So that's the kind of stuff we're trying to do.
Just quickly, somebody asked about Beto, and people get focused on stars or star campaigns and don't look at the bigger picture. And what happened in Texas is part of the bigger picture. But if you don't invest in the party, then a Beto, a Colin Allred will never win in that state.
Yeah.
If you do invest in the parties, they will win sooner or later.
Yeah.
That's okay. Wow, that's amazing. So I'm going to ask a related question. We're just getting a lot of questions, and then I have to hop off for another call. So I'll ask this, and then I'm going to dive. We're getting a lot of questions about New York State's Democratic Party. How can we build a state party in New York State like the ones these exemplary ones you're talking about?
Yeah. So one is we need, invest in SPAN and tell us that you're interested in that specific party, and we will help to raise. But I have to tell you, so I have often heard how bad New York State's party can be. I have heard it many, many times, but I met with them earlier this year because we were so concerned about those congressional races, because we were being asked, STAC was being asked to pick up the party. And I met with the executive director there, and we were really happily surprised to hear that they had 60 organizers on the ground, that they were focusing on these congressional races, that the elected leaders in that state had really raised serious money to invest in a field program, that they were aware of the fact that they were really struggling on the data side and were looking for support. Like, there were a lot of good signs. And I think it goes back to, you can't do everything all at once, but if there is investment there, you're not as dependent on one campaign, because that's the difference in philosophy here. Is some people believe that a state party is there to support the top of the ticket, and the top of the ticket kind of raises all the money, and then therefore they come to and say, this is what we should do. It's my theory that the Democratic Party should represent all the people that are Democrats, that have like values, and we should all invest in those parties so that we can help candidates at all levels all the time, and that we're not just focused on one or two races, but all the races. But it takes a lot of money to do that. And I think New York has turned a corner, that they are investing in right now they've invested in an organizing program that they hope to carry over. And so we would love to see donors helping them do that.
Amazing. Okay, I'm turning it back over to you, Brett.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica. And thank you, Lou and Martha. Boy, I am just like 1,000 times more educated about state parties than I was before. And I probably speak for other people on the call when I say that. And I just want to go help state parties. And one way you all can do it is to donate to the SPAN network through the link, which Liz has been putting in there. I just did it. I see lots of people have done it on the call. Thank you so much. That is what it's going to take. Now, one other thing, I know you're all here, so you probably don't care about seeing the recording of it, but Liz will be sending the recording of this event tomorrow, and to you and everybody who registered for the event, which was over 300 people for sure. And here's why I'm telling you this. It will include the link to the SPAN network. So if you didn't get to donate tonight, you can do it tomorrow from that link. But also, this is the most important thing, share that, forward that email to your friends and tell them to watch this recording and to help raise money for these really, really critical state organizations, and especially those two senators and that congressperson, because as Martha and Lou said, even if Kamala wins, there'll be no climate agenda if we don't also have the House and the Senate. So we have to dig deep, spread it around, get smart where we spread it, and hopefully you're learning about how to be smart with the spreading, in this How We Win series. Please join us next week and the week after. Liz is putting links to the Eventbrites for that. For those events, we will learn more, and specifically next time we'll be learning about voting blocks in particular. And then beyond that, we'll have Gene Karpinski with the League of Conservation Voters. So thank you again, everybody. Such a pleasure to see all of you, and thank you again.